So if you don't know Clare's work, she's based in Bath and she writes short stories and plays. And last year she was shortlisted for the Bridgeport Prize, but she's also been shortlisted and won many other national competitions. Her work is frequently broadcast on BBC Radio Bristol, and her plays have also been staged all across the UK. She runs regular live events in Bath. Some of them are called Story Fridays, Stories at the Farm, Festive Doorstep Stories, which may be happening this year, not sure, but sounds Christmassy. And she's currently compiling a short story collection and brooding on a potential novella, which I will look forward to. But tonight, it's all about her short story pamphlets. And I'm going to hand over to Clare to talk a little bit about the book and the season and what's going to happen this evening.
Hello, everybody. Well, welcome. It's so lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. It's very exciting for me. This is publication day for me of Guts of the Mackerel, which is the final of 6. I don't know where I've gone. Isabelle, I can't see myself. Do you know where I am?
Claire, if you change your
There.
view to speaker view, then you'll appear.
You're good. Amazing.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Because I just wanted to hold up all of these fantastic books. So Guts of the Mackerel is the final in a season of six books, and although it is absolutely thrilling for me that today it's being launched, it's also been really exciting all year to be getting every couple of months a sort of wonderful little book sort of popping through my door. So what I thought is, instead of just saying, oh look, listen, this is my book, this is absolutely marvelous, that what we do today is celebrate the whole series of books, because I have to say Fly on the Wall has I mean, they're all fabulous. There's such great choices. They're all beautifully written. All of the writers are here today except for one. And they're all really different, really punchy in their own way, really political, really social, socially important. And those of you who know my love of the short story and how excited I am about the form of the short story, all of them have got a really different form, and all of the writers really play with form in a really exciting way. So I think they're really great. So what I thought is that we'd meet each of the writers of the short stories and hear a little bit of each of the books, and then you will hear a little bit of Guts of the Mackerel, which is obviously a marvellous book by me. And then I thought we'd have a question and answer with Isabelle. So all of you writers out there who want to know how to submit to Isabelle, lucky Isabelle, you can ask her any questions you'd like to. So if anybody has any questions as you go along, please do put them in the chat, and we'll endeavour to answer them. For anybody, for any of the writers, for me, for Isabelle, anybody. So I thought we'd go in the way that the books arrived. So last January, which was the last time all of the writers of this group met, we had Pigskin by Dr. David Hartley. And Pigskin is a powerful lambasting of the marketing system and our relationship with food. And I'm going to pass over to David to tell us a little bit about himself and about the book, and read a little bit out of the book.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm David, and I was fortunate enough to be the first writer in the short season, which has just been completely wonderful. Claire's absolutely right. It's been such a joy receiving all of these little these kind of pamphlets every periodically throughout the year. It's been great. Pigskin is a really horrible, dark and twisted story, and I'll read a little bit from it at the beginning in a minute. It was also a little bit of a prelude to my other book that came out this year with Fly on the Wall, which is Fauna. This is sort of breaking up on the screen, but it's Fauna is a book of a collection of short stories about animals, and Pigskin sort of was kind of like the appetizer, the hors d'oeuvre of that particular collection. So I'll read from the beginning of Pigskin, just a little bit of it. A little bit of a warning. It's a bit dark and a bit grim and a bit sweary at times, but not too bad, probably. I'll only read a tiny bit. Okay, this is the start of Pigskin. Pig is reborn with skin made of bacon. He sizzles in the summer heat. Farmyard noses follow scent trails all the way to his sty. Saliva drips, puddles on hooves. Give us a nibble, says cow. Yeah, come on, says horse. And pig sulks in his hide until the sun goes away and takes the animals with it. They drift back daily. They watch for signs of the sickness like crows before a war. He keeps back from the fence out of reach. The other pigs, the potbellies, bring him swill and oats with grunts and nods and half-arsed solidarity. Your time will come, he thinks, but he is grateful. He is pig, and his skin is bacon, and his brain is pork, and his teeth are scratchings, and his face is ham, and his cock is a sausage spiked with rosemary and thyme. He chomps on his swill. He does not know what his food is or where it is from, but he is grateful. The farm is blasted and hell-blown, rusted and gut-sown. The farm is shocked machinery spiking the sky, grey grass sucking at metal. The farm is torture devices out to pasture and peeling. The farm is a gunland, a grot, a smear. The farm is buildings with holes. Pig sizzles in the summer heat and wishes he would just rot already, just rot away. His heart is black pudding. Give us a bite, pig, says cow. Just a bit, says goat. Scrape it off. The animals are hungry, not being fed. They're not the important ones, not the ones the farm wants. Duck was the first, and now Duck is gone. Pig knows he has been changed for something, but he does not know what, and neither do they. They won't climb into his sty. They're not that stupid. Why are you being this way? Cries sheep. We're not asking for much. Cow again. She's the one that learned the human language, winding her tongue around all those exhausting sounds. She taught it to the rest, and now she thinks she leads them, thinks she is the boss. She whispers, tasty pig now, good for us all, big enough to share, just a bit each, Streaky, and then say no more. Pig never bothered with the language learning, never saw the point. He makes his points differently, the way animals should. He rolls in the bitter mud, cakes himself, shits himself, rolls in that too. Sick bastard, says cow. She turns to the rest and stomps. Sick bastard, sick bastard, sick bastard. But they don't go away. Pig lets them stare. They won't climb into his sty. They're not that stupid. Not yet. I'll stop there. Thank you. That's Pigskin. And it gets weirder and darker and stranger and more horrible from that point on. So if you like that sort of thing, pick it up.
Yeah, I think that's fun. It was so fantastic to hear that, David. Thank you so much. It is very weird and punchy and dark and amazing. And I'm very pleased that our farming friends are not amongst us this evening. But thank you so much. That was really, really lovely. So you need to buy Pigskin. The second book in the six books was this one, which is called PowerPoint Eulogy, and it's by Mark Wilson, who can't be here this evening because he's in America, and he has got to be in meetings all day. And it's quite ironic, really, because his book is a sort of inventive, funny, tragic indictment of corporate culture, and it's quite funny that he's been hoisted by corporate culture to not be here tonight. It's kind of amazing. I'll just show you a bit of it. It's how many slides is it? 44, I think. 42 PowerPoint slides. I'll just show you how it's almost like poems about a man called Bill Motluck, who it's his eulogy. and it's kind of amazing. So I'd really, really recommend it, but I'm not going to read a bit of it because I'm not quite sure which bit he'd like me to read, and he's not here. So we're going to pass swiftly on to Louise Finnigan's fabulous Muscle and Mouth, which I think has got this fabulous, anybody who recognises audio tapes, old enough for audio tapes, there we are. And this one came in May, and it's set mainly in a very deprived estate in Manchester. The sense of place in this story is just extraordinary, and the kind of mixture, the form of it, again, I think is really interesting, and I think it's a beautiful book. But I hope that Louise will tell us a little bit more about it and read from it.
I will. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you to Isabelle, obviously, for, I'll just quickly get the chance to say how absolutely brilliant it has been the whole year being part of Fly on the Wall, and kind of just getting the chance to meet these other writers and kind of work together on such an interesting project. I've just enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you. So Muscle and Mouth is a story about social class to a certain extent, and a story about language. It's a story in which Jade, the narrator, who's kind of a teenager from a Manchester council estate, has been asked as part of a college, like A-level language investigation, to record and transcribe her friends talking and then comment about it in an essay. So she kind of knows what she's expected to say. She's able to kind of code switch between very academic language and just the natural language that she would use when she's talking to her friends, because this is the place where she belongs. And I think really it's kind of looking at some of those tensions around social mobility and some of that conflict. So I've read quite a lot from the start of this story, but I think what I'm going to do today is read from the middle. So I'm just going to jump straight in to the centre of the story. I hope that's okay. A hammer. He has a fucking hammer. At 5 minutes and 25 seconds into the tape, there is the sound of Mikey opening the door, and then the sound of Darren Naylor making one lunging smash into the electric meter, and a second into Mikey's face. The lights blink on off until darkness catches up with what's happening. What is happening? The heft of metal against flesh, against tooth, against bone. I'm in the hallway looking down, my eyes adjusting to the thick, buzzing shadows. I see Mikey's hands fly to his mouth and Naylor slowly raising his head to look up. His hands are tight around the hammer, about to swing again. Stephen and Connor push past me and stagger down the stairs towards Mikey, who lurches forwards to ram his shoulder against the door. Connor throws the bulk of his body against it too, and Stephen yanks the bolt across. I can smell how scared we all are. I can hear it in the scrabbling panic of our bodies. The banister is slippery under my palm. Mikey turns and starts to climb past the others towards me. He stumbles and spits into his hands, looks down at the 3 broken teeth that have been knocked out of his head. It's all right, he keeps trying to say, the blood bubbling from his mouth. It's all right. I go back into the living room and switch off the tape. While the events transcribed may be thought of as dramatic or surprising, from a linguistic perspective, the findings are very much in line with established research. Get him a towel, says Connor, and Stephen comes back with a grimy-looking dishcloth. Connor shakes his head and disappears into the bathroom, coming back with some wet toilet roll that he presses against the swollen mush of Mikey's lips. I sit there, watching the way he does it. There's something meticulous about it, something practiced. We can still hear the crash and roar of Naylor on the street, so Stephen jerks the blinds down across the window, but he pulls too hard and it slips flimsily to the floor. As expected in male-to-male interaction, the speakers compete for dominance using a combination of raised volume, interruption, and expletive. We also see many examples of face-threatening behaviour where participants insult one another or undermine the self-image a speaker is trying to project. Connor steps back and looks down at the dark clumps of toilet roll in his hand. Stephen finds a candle from under the sink. Mikey lights his joint with shaking hands. Reckon I'll get any dosh? He asks after a while. We all look at him. His shape is monstrous in the candlelight, and his words are soft as pulp. Who off? Stephen says, and Mikey laughs. Off the fucking tooth fairy. He throws his head back, opening that terrible mouth. The carpet is littered with cig ends and cans, and eventually Mikey slides onto it, his bruised lips open and snoring. The flat smells ripe with cannabis and sweat. The swivel ashtray has stopped working, or at least we've stopped using it. No one wants to go home in case Nayla's still stalking about down there, so Stephen tells us we can sleep over. He looks at the floor as he says it. The dark behind his head is cavernous, as if Nayla has smashed all Stephen's dreams from the air. He picks up the empty tins and bottles, and I hear them clanking down into a bin in the tiny kitchen. He comes back and blows out the candle, smooths down his shirt. He looks at me in the slant of streetlight from the window. Then he looks at Connor. Night then, he says. Night, I say, but he is gone. The card he gave me was pink with flowers and heavy with the weight of something that had been thought about for far too long. To a special friend, it said, in gold letters on the front. It didn't stop him from spelling the word special wrong on the inside, or the word intelligent. And the thought of him getting into bed alone on the other side of the wall doesn't stop me from reaching out to the body that is already searching for mine in the dark. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful, Louise. That's such a God, it's such a strong, that awful moment where he hits him in the mouth with the hammer. Oh my God. And it's so frightening. Yeah, as David said, it's a really brutal passage. And you know, when you're reading it, you just think, oh my God, he's going to come up the stairs. He's going to come up the stairs. It's incredibly tense, and it's very moving. Actually, I found it very moving.
Thank you. I had fun reading it.
Well, it was lovely to hear. Thank you, Louise. And then in July, we got another one, which was Ruth Brandt, and we've got Hassan's Zoo. Now, I don't know if any of you can possibly guess which Ruth is, because somebody has been doing both you and David have done fantastic marketing by having your book covers as your background, whereas everybody's just got my sort of, unbelievably untidy study. This is such a lovely, a heartbreaking story, set in Iraq during the Iraq War. Beautifully written. Ruth, please tell us a little bit more about it.
Thank you ever so much, Claire. And as the other two have said, it's been a fabulous year, and it's so lovely to spend it virtually online with 5 other wonderful writers, and of course Isabelle. So thank you very much. Yes, Hasanzu. Actually, this book is the only one with 2 stories in it. There's Hasanzu, and there's a second one, A Village in Winter. And I just thought I've read from them both, and so I just wondered, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how they came to be written and go around the other way at it, because the way I like to write short stories in particular is I just start writing. And I find that when I'm writing, all the stuff that's currently obsessing me or concerning me starts bubbling up into the story. And so I never really quite know until I finished a first draft. I think, oh yes, that's been worrying me. And so what the story, A Village in Winter, one of the ways I start my stories often is to use a painting. And I'm just going to change my background to the painting that inspired this story. It's actually called A Village Street in Winter, and it's by Gabriella Munter. And I looked at this painting and I didn't know what to write. And so as often, I just started writing, and this is what started occurring. But as you'll see, what I start doing is describing what I'm seeing. And so I'll just read from the opening page in a bit from this story. For a couple of days that winter, it blew warm. Half our street, the south-facing half, glinted with ochres and terracottas in the strobing sunlight, while the north-facing side radiated Arctic blue. Uphill, land warmed by the unexpected heat gave up its water and the river began to rise. None of us worried much about the river. After all, for a brief while, we had our street back to play in. Even Matt the Frost came out, loitering on his blue side of the street, posing spiky figures in its shadows, his bobble hat erect, his glove pulled to the end of his fingers, arm jittering, throat grunting. "Why don't you kids dance too?" Mrs. Gregory suggested, as though it was up to us to lure Matt the Frost from the dark side. "Go on." She went as far as placing her radio on the doorstep. Frizz, Sarah and I had no intention of dancing. "He is mental," Frizz said. If Sarah or I had said that, Mrs. Gregory would have cuffed us. Instead, she pulled her coat close. "Go on, Bun," she said to me. I shrugged. What was the point? It was Mr. Drake who warned us about the river. Nothing much, just a comment as he passed us by on the melted side of the street. "Don't go near the banks, kids," he called. The minute his door was shut, we crossed the shadow's dark line to investigate. From behind the dark bush came a shuffling and the flick of a knitted hat. I paused. Was that Matt hissing or the river water scraping through the reeds? "Hey," Sarah shouted, and I found that I'd been left behind in the shadow zone, alone with the scent of Matt the Frost. I ran. "What?" I called, glancing back. "Look." A rug, a genuine green and blue patterned rug, was rushing down the river. "My granny's," Frizz said, but we all knew that Frizz had no granny. He had no dad either, just him and Matt and their mum, who never came out, not even with the sun. So that's the opening of the second story, but I will go back to the main story with my tiger. So as Claire said, Hasanzu is a story about a young lad who is a zookeeper in the Baghdad Zoo at a time when the Americans had their shock and awe invasion of Iraq. And I'm going to read from the opening of this because the way I started writing this, I was reading Atonement by Ian McEwan, and there's a lovely long paragraph in there that just goes on and on and on, where Brian is running through the English sort of organized gardens down to a fountain. And as she's running, she's weaving in and out of her thoughts and weaving in and out of everything. And it just goes on and on. I thought, I wonder if I can do anything like that. But I couldn't do it in the English countryside because that would be copying him, obviously. So I set it somewhere entirely different. And I found this is what I was writing about. The paragraph that I wrote that was inspired by that paragraph by Ian McEwan is the last one I'm going to read. And I've slightly edited the opening so that it doesn't go on too long. So this is the opening to Hasanzu. For the first 6 days, Hassan couldn't leave the house he shared with his mother, father, and 2 younger sisters, Hajar and Farah. As explosions jutted the floor and the incessant high-pitched shrieks of missiles passed overhead, he worried that they would all die, suffocated by brick dust, their limbs crushed by chunks of rubble. Towards the end of those days, in carefully selected moments when the noise of the warfare dulled, he permitted his heart to lilt with the hope that the fighting might be over. And at times like these, his thoughts turned away from what the future held for him and his family, towards the animals he should have been caring for. He never doubted that the other zoo staff would be holed up in their houses too. The occasional visit from a neighbour with news of a ministry bombed or a block taken, or rumour passed stealthily from person to person that electricity would be available at 7 that evening, invariably also told of city streets empty of civilians. Even doctors and nurses were staying away from hospitals where life-threatening injuries, plenty of these were discussed and grieved over, were left unattended to. What madness was taking place? "Tomorrow will be better," Hassan's father would pacify the visitors and his family, who, like him, could only envisage a brighter future. Shock and awe. His father shook his head as he said these words, as if he himself were in awe of the military operation taking place for their benefit. By the 7th day, food supplies gathered diligently during the preceding weeks of negotiation and searches for weapons of mass destruction were becoming low, and although buckets, empty cans, and even his younger sister's doll's prams were brimming with water, the daily half-hour gushes from the taps ceased. "I'm going out," Hassan announced, at which his mother let out a predictable wail. "We'll be needing food soon," he reassured, "and I'll see if there's any water anywhere." Both of these were true, and certainly it was in his intention to bring back whatever food there might be to bring home, but he also had a compulsion to get to his animals. He could imagine only too well that the effect that a week of being confined without food and water, incomprehensible noises blasting, might be having at the zoo. I won't be long. He kissed his mother on her hair parting, patted his sisters' heads, and finally shook his father's hand. Be careful, his father said, and squeezed Hassan's hand a touch tighter than necessary for a goodbye. He found the street abnormally quiet. He darted from shadow to shadow, down alleys and through bombed buildings, pausing to listen, glancing at rooftops and round corners, his heart racing out of all proportion with the speed of his legs. And as he made slow, convoluted progress towards the zoo, his mind ran along the row of cages: 4 gorillas, 6 rhesus monkeys, a variety of parrots and budgerigars, 3 Labradors and a beagle, and then onto the bear enclosure containing the female brown bear. And ignoring the shattered debris all around him, he prayed to Allah that they would be unharmed. Thank you, Claire.
That's fantastic, Ruth. How wonderful to hear you read from both of those. I mean, what incredible powers of description you've got there. I mean, I love the breathing in brick dust. I mean, I felt I was absolutely there with Hassan, but equally also in the in the village. And I loved that picture that you put behind you, and that was your inspiration. That's really interesting. Thank you so much. And we can all look at Hassan's tiger for the rest of the time, which is also a joy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So then we came to September and to How to Bring Him Back by Clare H.M., which is the thickest of our books, of our 6 books, and is, oh my goodness, it's really kind of raw, visceral tale of a woman looking back on her life and relationships. Maybe that would, I don't know if that, I'm sure Claire will describe it herself, but I would say that it has such an incredibly powerful sense of time and place, this story. You really again feel that you're there. So let's hear from Claire.
Hello. I just have to reflect what everyone else says. It's so wonderful being part of the short season gang, and yeah, it's just thanks, Isabelle, and it's great to be part of this group of writers. So it's been a special year. Yay. So as Claire says, my book How to Bring Him Back, it's set actually in 2 time frames. So there's a previous time frame which is set in 90s Birmingham, and then a more current time frame which is the same character looking back at her life. And it's close to 70 pages long, so as Claire says, it's the thickest. So it's closer to a novella, and it's framed as an apology to an ex-lover, and also framed as a spell. There's this idea of spelling and collapsing time when we write or when we read a story, and that's one of the things in spells and magic and witchcraft, to collapse a sense of time and place. And all my writing, really, I'm interested in love and longing, and writing about Birmingham, and through the intersections of class and gender and magic and mythology, if you can imagine that. So I'm going to read a passage, one of the reflective passages. So from the older Kate looking back, making an apology to a past lover. My alarm went off at 5 this morning while everything was still dark. Lack of sleep wouldn't stop me from getting up. Routine's what keeps me together now. If I'm tired, after lunch, I'll nap. Every morning, breakfast. Yes, I eat breakfast now. Journaling, sun salutations. And if it's not a teaching day, back to the page with that big barreled pen. Does knowing that I try to make myself better and shinier qualify as part of this apology? I didn't use you as a prototype to treat a slew of other men in a shitty way. I've just stuck to disappointing and being disappointed by my lovers in a myriad of vanilla ways. But those little ways still manage to stab. It's just over time, I've learnt to keep the drama on the page. When I applied for my master's in Aberystwyth, I'd so wanted the freshness of a new start by the sea, to play out my fantasy of being a real writer. And real writers drank too much, fell in love too easily, and were heading for their own special tragedy. Clichés, I was full of them. But the unwholesomeness, the dirtiness was in me, not in the city I was escaping, and I took it to Aber with me. Aber was not fresh because Kate was not fresh. What kind of brummy drama did you take to Oz and Sue's stad? Or was it all out of your system by then? I was so afraid of looking like I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't even admit I was baffled by ABBA's weird library system. It took me a fortnight to find my pigeonhole, and my only post a letter from my mum. Did I know that Dolores from the Cranberries had bleached her hair now? And when was I going to send her a cheque for my half of the last electricity bill? Because there's no way I'd already given her the cash. She wouldn't forget that. And if I ever wanted to come home again. With this fear and this smallness, and just 1 month into my course, I had an epiphany. I didn't need to be in academia to be a writer. I could move back to Brum, where the booze and the men flowed freely and the stuff of a real writerly life. And I didn't need to live with my mum, but I did need to write to be a writer and not stuff the holes with aimless journaling, with drinking and with men, with Rick and with you. This B&B room today, with its smell of bleach and salty dampness, and the single glazed whitewashed window that looks out into a distant roiling sea, is a doppelganger of the room I had during my postgrad ABBA minute. It's bare except for the bed I sit on and a wardrobe that I don't need to use. Yesterday's jeans and soft charcoal sweater are folded on top of my suitcase, lying behind the door. The sun's rising now in a mauve sky, screaming with starlings. And we're not the only early risers. I'm 4 floors up, and outside the window I see a bright green diamond kite whipping around, not very skillfully. Perhaps a parent and their small child. I can't see the beach from here. Still the sea rustles in my ears. When I write about us, Stad, it doesn't feel like I'm writing about the past. It feels like I'm predicting the future, the grimmest future I can think of from my first Aberystwyth room.
Oh, Claire, that was fantastic. That was fantastic to hear. It really leaps off the page. It works really well out loud, your work. That's just really lovely to hear. And I love, when I was reading it again, I love that bit about the mother's letter about the electric. You know, it just says so much in just that line. And going back to Brum for all the booze and the men and the writing. It's just fantastic.
Thanks,
I love
Claire,
it.
thanks so much.
Lots of booze and men in that one. It's really
Only in the books, of course.
not only, of course. Well, what a pleasure to have heard from all of you. And then we got to December. In fact, to today, when this came out. And so this is a story which is very personal to me, actually, although none of it happened, but it's still very personal to me. And it's about identity, and it's about the Troubles, and it's about the island of Ireland. And I'm going to read you the first few pages. It's called The Guts of a Mackerel. Eve was putting on mascara in the cottage bathroom. It was her good mascara, the Maybelline Great Lash she'd bought after saving her pocket money for weeks. It was hard enough when the mirror was the size of a handkerchief and hung far too high. But she was blinking down on the wand, a trick she'd read about in Just 17, and the wand was especially big. It was supposed to make her eyelashes double thickness, but instead it was clotting and sticking, and every time she actually blinked, because she had to, the mascara fell off her eyelashes and onto her cheeks, so she looked like a clown, but not in a good way, not like our Adamant whose eyes were smoking. She had to look her best. He hadn't seen her for months and months, and she definitely improved. Now the twins were bursting in and sticking out their tongues at her. One of them had some seaweed and was thwacking her ankles with it. Her ankles would stink. "Mum, can you get them to leave me alone? Can you make up the bunk beds?" Which was not the answer she wanted, because no, she couldn't make up the bunk beds, she couldn't unpack, she couldn't stack the tins they'd brought, she couldn't do anything because she had to see Liam right now. He didn't know she was here, didn't know she was even in Ireland. It was a big surprise. And now Mum wanted help. "Piss off," she said to Big Twin, pinching his wrist, not hard, but hard enough to make him back away. She slid out of the bathroom into the kitchen and was at the back door when Small Twin saw her. He was about to shout, but she put her fingers to her lips. "Shh," she said, and winked. He went pink with delight. Secret! And Eve was out. She set off down the road to Liam's house. She'd got on her denim cut-offs and her new wedges. She'd brushed her best plum eyeshadow onto her eyelids, and she'd sprayed herself with Charlie, a present from her best friend Becca at her last birthday. Butterflies were turning somersaults in her tummy. She hadn't seen Liam since last summer. They'd sent each other letters, of course, and she'd taken his into school to show Becca in triumph, because a letter from a boy was big news, even if the letter was really short and the spelling was shocking. Last summer they'd spent almost every day of the holiday together, from when Eve's family had first arrived. They'd sat on the beach and they'd talked, properly talked about their lives, their dreams, their futures. He'd held her hand, and when she had to go, because the holiday was over, he'd kissed her on her cheek. She hadn't washed the cheek for days, until the twins were flicking baked beans around at tea, and one had hit her full in the face, and he was either washing or living with a weird orange smear for the rest of her life. Liam was the only thing that she'd been thinking about since Dad said they were coming over at Easter. They'd have 2.5 whole weeks. She turned the corner, and there was his house, square, painted white with a green door, and an old Ford Escort with red Irish number plates parked outside. It was all she could do not to run, but she forced herself to stroll, as though the idea of paying a call on an old friend had merely popped into her head. She rang the doorbell. There was no answer. Odd. It was the school holidays. The car was outside. There were 9 O'Sullivan children. One of them was always hanging around the house. She rang again. She heard the doorbell echo. A baby cried. That would be Noel. He'd be about 9 months now. Eve didn't know anything about babies, but she was pretty sure they didn't stay at home alone. She looked up at the window. His window. She thought she caught a movement. Tiny, almost imperceptible, as though someone had moved too close to a curtain as they stepped back out of sight. She picked up a pebble and threw it, clipped the window. In the silence, it sounded really loud. No one looked out. No one came. She stood outside the blank closed door, and suddenly she felt like an idiot in her swanky clothes with all her makeup on, all got up like for a Saturday night disco. Red embarrassment started at her ankles and flamed straight up her body to her face. She turned and hurried away. She wanted to crawl into her bed and never come out. She swerved onto the path that led down to the shore. No one would see her down there. When she was little, the first thing she did when they got here was to rush out and touch the sea. Now she barely looked at the waves. She had to concentrate as she tottered across the granite boulders in her wedges. When she missed her footing and slid into a rock pool, she started to cry in earnest. Eve was bedraggled when she pushed open the back door of the cottage. The twins fell apart laughing. "Oh, yeah, you got black on ya!" They screeched, pointing at Eve's cheeks where the mascara had run in great sooty rivulets. "There you are." Mum was up to her elbows in the sink. Mum always did a big wash when they arrived. She saw the mess that Eve was in. She didn't say, "You can dry. There's a tea towel in the drawer. How was the beach? Tied in or out?" Eve took a tea towel and started to dry the glasses slowly. I went down to the O'Sullivans." Mum's hands stilled momentarily, then started on the mugs. "Oh, how are they keeping?" she asked. "It was weird. No one answered the door." "Maybe they've gone out for the day," said Mum. "They never do that," said Eve. Dad walked in. The salt had already got to him, and his hair was curling and springing free, nothing like his everyday commuter hair. "Who's hidden the key to the shed?" he asked. "Eve's been to the O'Sullivans, but no one's in," said Mum. And she looked at Dad, and Dad looked at her, and the air pinged with questions. And that's all I'm going to read of that. Da 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 da! What do you think's going to happen next? You'll have to buy the book. Thank you. Anyway, so that's Guts for Mackerel, and that's all of our wonderful stories from all of the writers in the short season. But the air is pinging with questions. Thank you. I thought now, if it would be okay to do a question and answer with Isabelle, to find out a bit more. There are loads of writers in the audience, and I'm sure that they'd all like to hear a bit more about Fly on the Wall Press. So I thought that I'd ask Isabelle some questions, but if anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask Isabelle that I haven't thought of, pop them in the chat. But I thought we'd start off by, I just wondered if you could tell us, why you set up Fly on the Wall Press, Isabelle. How long has it been going, and what made you want to start up a publishing house?
Yeah, firstly, I just wanted to say, Claire, it was such a gorgeous reading. I can really tell that you write play scripts, and I don't know, I think you dabble in a bit of actual theatre yourself, don't you, as performing?
Well, I do a lot of reading of stories. Yeah.
I can tell, you're a brilliant performer. I love that.
Even on Zoom, blimey.
Yeah, no, even on Zoom, it was brought to life. I think everyone agreed as well. There's some lovely comments in the chat for you. But yeah, it's been, I started it in 2018, but back then it was just charity anthologies. So I was working in theatre marketing and I just was writing myself and I wanted to work with other writers. So I decided, okay, well, why would people submit to me? Because I just had a blog and I thought, why are they going to want to work with me? And just sort of got onto the world of Twitter and, no one knew who I was. So I thought, okay, well, everyone cares. Like, I think very much back then, even though it's a big discussion now, people tended to be writing about mental health and it seemed like a big thing that people wanted to write about. So we did an anthology on that. And I think just the theme of raising money for Mind, like so 600 people submitted to that. And, it's just a blog that no one knew about. And we created this book with 116 of them. And then we did another one because I was like, okay, well, people clearly liked it, so why not? So we did one for Crisis Aid, which is a refugee charity across the world. And also for Shelter in the UK. So that was about displacement and exile and being rejected from society for various different reasons. So yeah, then we thought, okay, well, people think we are a proper publisher now, so we just started calling ourselves it. And then in 2019, we started publishing individual writers, and every year we've done something different. So in 2019, we did the poetry. 2020, we started doing short story collections. 2021 was the year of the short stories. So we had this gorgeous season, which I've absolutely loved. It was amazing. I had such a sense of community. I was feeling quite emotional when Clare was reading. So I thought, like, with the short season, it's limited edition. So it's not like all the other books, where when they're gone, and soon they will be gone, and we won't have this subscription anymore. So I was thinking, this is quite sad actually, because you're such wonderful writers, and it's been like you're all so supportive as well. I think that's the thing that I've loved about starting the press. You work with people and you just really admire them as writers and as people. You think, this is such a lovely community. And the literary community that supports small presses is why you want to keep going when you've started.
Yeah, because it must, I mean, that sounds fantastic, Isabelle, but it must be really, really hard work. I mean, I know it is. I mean, the level of the production values actually in these books are so high. I've had various things published before that just don't look as beautiful as these do. So that's just an absolute joy. So how would you what do you think sets Fly in the Wall Press apart from other publishers? What's the sort of the link between the books that you publish?
Yeah, do you know, I've been thinking about this really deeply recently. My granddaddy got me this really good book, which I think is super old. I mean, I don't think anyone will particularly care, but I'll show it you anyway because it's next to me. So this one, it's called like Strategic Marketing for Business Success, which sounds so dry, but honestly, it's the best thing ever. I got lost on a bus the other day because I got the wrong one, even though it was the exact same Bright Stop. But anyway, so I read the whole book and took notes, and it's all about like business strategy for like next year. And yeah, it's all about, who does stuff different to you, but why are you better and not better, but what makes you unique and things like that. So I've been having to think about it very deeply. But yeah, I think now I'll see if my notes have paid off. But yeah, I think that everything that we try and do is, in terms of communication, I try and make it as accessible and friendly as possible. I think traditionally publishing has been quite closed doors. And I think the thing about small presses is that, you can completely demystify the process. You can make someone understand and feel valued as a writer, and, tell them, like, talk about money. That is important. You made a product, you spent years doing it, talk about it, ask about it up front. And I want to be that sort of press. And also I want to be a really ethical press. So everything that we do, especially from this year on, every single book is forest stewardship certified, which means that the printer will be using a forest that is well managed and has that certification to show it. And then like all the things that we do will be recyclable, carbon neutral, all the packaging, things like that. And also even the sellotape, fine, like you can get vegetable sellotape now, so we got that. And, you know, we pretty much got absolutely everything. So I think that's just so important. You know, you feel, we do print on demand, but I still feel a little bit guilty when you go to print and you think, oh gosh, you know, so I think it's just important to have the right kind of trees being knocked down. No one quote me on this one, but yeah, and I think that the thing that links them all, even though we have different genres, you know, next year we're doing novels, which, you know, apart from Claire's, we don't have like novellas as of yet on our books, but is that they all have a social conscience, and so they've got like, they're politically minded. I wouldn't say they hit you with the politics, but there's a sort of background or a character that's not represented heavily in traditional publishing, that you just think this is the space for it to have its voice and say something about society.
Yeah, I think that's very true of the stories that we've heard today. Actually, they've all got, you know, they come at politics from, you know, a side route, and I really like that, you know, because you can become, I think one of the things about being a kind of political publisher is it can be a bit kind of issue-y, whereas actually these are really great stories that also highlight lots of social and political issues, which is fantastic. And I love the sound of the ethical forests and the vegetable sellotape.
Yeah,
Excellent.
why, like, this is actually like the sellotape brand, and I thought, like, why don't they start eliminating obviously because of money, but if they were completely ethical, they would just say, well, we don't need the plastic sellotape now that we have vegetable sellotape, and they just eliminate the first one, and then we'd all have to buy the ethical one. But they're not going to do that, are they? But it's only £2 and one's £1, so I mean, I know it's double, but at the same time, it'd be great.
It is difficult. I have no thoughts on how ethical the sellotape. I don't even know who makes sellotape. Anyway, but fascinating. How fascinating. So I wonder. I think you've told us a little bit about what the pros and cons are for writers of small presses. But what about for readers? Do you think there are any pros and cons? Because I mean, I think that the Booker shortlist was. There were a lot of small presses. It's very kind of zeitgeisty at the minute, the small press, you know. There you are, sitting on the zeitgeist, if you can do such a thing.
I think maybe like a con is that, you know, traditionally you're not going to be very well presented in bookshops because, you know, publishers pay for the space in a bookshop. And I'm sure that it's thousands of pounds to be, you know, front of the Waterstones, or so we're going to always be hidden. So I think for readers, they're not going to find us easily if we're in the bookshop, which sometimes we are, but, you know, only be sort of one or two of our copies in the chains rather than all of what we offer. So I think it potentially can get lost. I guess the other cons are that, you know, we have a really big community, if you like, worldwide, of readers who don't have the internet, and, you know, again, they might not know about us because small press is quite active online. It tends to be like that, you know, social media obviously is free, so small presses tend to use that as a really large network, and so sometimes we can't reach those readers, and I'm always thinking, okay, how do we reach, say, like book groups or more libraries or, you know, school groups, that kind of thing, because when you're making a recommendation, they're going to make a recommendation of, you know, I mean, like you say, there were some small presses on the Booker, but they're going to go to the prizes and they're going to think, okay, let's recommend X, Y, Z, which traditionally, like, for example, the Costa, you know, if you get shortlisted, and small presses have been shortlisted, but you have to pay 25k. So yeah, I think people don't know about this. So this is why small presses don't enter these prizes, because it's free to enter, but then if you succeed, you have to give your life's blood, and yeah, so you can't afford to do that. So that's why, you know, you get knocked back. But I think the pros, if they do find us, which yay when they do, is that they're going to get something a little bit different, because we don't have to, you know, publishing can be quite conservative. They can say, okay, this is one genre, we know this genre sells, we're going to go for that genre, and we're going to go for like a particular character and a particular way of storytelling in that genre. So it's like very niche. Whereas small presses, they don't have the bureaucracy of someone saying, well, this book has to make 1 million, and if it doesn't, then you failed and you'll lose your job. So we sort of will take a risk on things that maybe don't have a set genre, or maybe a prickly story. And I think that's a positive, because all the books that have done well for us, you know, are ones that you might be like, oh, do I really want to do that? Will I offend someone? And it's always worked out. Because I think readers, they do want to read that. They want to read things that challenge them. And maybe that is not always in the forefront of Waterstones, because, you know, they want to appeal to everyone. And maybe small presses cater not for everyone, but for people that want a niche and something a little bit more different.
That's really interesting. Fly on the wall press. Prickly.
I like the word prickly. I don't know. I think it describes things quite well.
And I'm astonished that 25 grand for the Costa. That is really shocking.
Okay, isn't it?
Yeah, very shocking. I just wanted to ask you, on behalf of all of the aspiring writers who might or might not be here, do you have any advice for aspiring writers? And I know your submissions are closed at the minute, but are they likely to be open? And if they are, what would you be looking for? Is there anything you'd like to see landing on your desk?
Yeah, well, we've got a few things, because we open every year in autumn for manuscripts, but we're going to have a few things opening before that time. The first one is the magazine will open sort of late spring for a summer publication. And I haven't decided on the theme for that yet, so I can't pre-tip anyone. But if anyone has an exciting theme, they can run it past me. And then you'll probably bring out 10 works on that theme because you've decided it yourself. But yeah, I'm just still deciding on the theme. But then we'll also have an anthology, which will open in summer for October publication. I'm like itching to announce it, but I'm still waiting on the charity to confirm that they want to work with us. And said charity worker has COVID, so I haven't heard from her in a little while. And they have to do a background check on us. And it's been, honestly, like, I wanted to work with them, but it's been the longest route to get in a book. It was meant to be last year, so they just don't respond. But I do want to work with them, so we'll see. So that'll be our next charity anthology. So. And I'll give you a hint. It's about like democracy and protest and all these things around the world. And yeah, because there's been a hell of a lot, isn't there? And this is why I wanted it to be last year when we were in the height of uprising, and I'm thinking of the US storming the Capitol. But so there's lots. I still feel like it will be really exciting when we get around to it. So there's that coming up, and that will be short stories, poetry, and artwork and photography. So usually we would do poetry, artwork, photography, but this time we thought we'll do short stories as well, just because, you know, we've now got a name for it. So we'll put it in there and mix them all. And then, yeah, so in autumn, I'd say when we open for book submissions, I think maybe, I mean, all the writers in the short season as well, they all sort of come at the book, but they have approached journals before. They've all been published in places, and they have like a really strong idea of what their voice is. And I think that's what makes all their stories so great. You know, their voices really stand out. And I think you all know who you are as writers. So I think I would say, you know, even if you write about completely different subjects, do you know what your voice sounds like? And does it really change from piece to piece? And if it does, maybe you have a little bit more honing to do before you go, yeah, this is the kind of things that I like to write about. Because I think, you know, working on a book, you have to be quite confident, you know, because you have to go and perform it, you have to tell people about it. And I want to work with people who are really excited to do that part as well, because I think, you know, that's part of the small press world, that we don't have like big PR teams. So we've got like a strong network of 2 or 3 to shout about your book. So, you know, I want you to be really passionate about it. That doesn't mean you have to be confident, because I know writers are always scared people who don't believe in their work entirely. But, you know, that's my job, to shout about your work. So I think, yeah, be confident, be part of writing communities, like feedback groups, that kind of thing's super helpful. And, you know, all these people that have supported you along the way, they're going to want to support your book. And I think that's really lovely. I think a lot about the small press is the network. So when I see that someone's going to open mics, or they have a feedback group and they tell me a little bit about that in their cover letter, I really like that, because that tells me, that they're, one, open to feedback, two, that they support writers, and it also just shows me, like, you know, we can work together because they're part of those communities and they're going to enjoy being part of the small press community.
That's really interesting. That's incredibly useful. Oh, I've got this echo. How wonderful. So everybody should write to you saying that they're part of feedback groups. Good.
Yeah.
It's a really handy tip. But I think it's really interesting also that thing you're talking about, you know, on Twitter, because you're really active on Twitter and really kind of you're always out there, and it, you know, I love seeing that. It's just it gives a real sort of feeling of energy to the press, and that things are happening. Or, you know, my launch is happening, obviously.
I love Twitter. I think Twitter's great for writers. I think that's the best one.
Yeah.
Because people talk to each other, don't they, in a way that maybe they don't on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I don't think anyone talks on LinkedIn.
I don't know. I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm ashamed to say. That's fantastic though, Isabelle. So that's a really, really good, there's loads of things that people can submit to over the year for you. I mean, you know, how fantastic. And probably the most sensible thing for both readers and writers to do is to sign up to your mailing list.
Yeah, absolutely. I should put it in the chat because, like, for example, I've done like the vague opening, but mailing letter, I will always tell people it's open now. So I'll put that in the chat so that people can sign up, and even if they're not a writer, learn about books.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, be a reader, because the you know, the books that you publish are so fantastic. I don't see any. There are no particular questions for you from the writers are all hiding under parapets. In kind of wishing to be anonymous, but so I thought I might finish by asking you what your favourite book is.
Yeah, I think I changed this recently, actually, and Claire HM gets a shout out now, because we were talking about how much we love Miranda July, and I was saying, do you love her as well?
Oh yeah, I love her. What's that? The Tin Bowl. It's not called that. There's a short story that she wrote.
Is it in this one, or is it a different one?
I can't remember what it's called. Put on the spot now.
See if there's someone in here, but
anyway, I love Miranda July. I think she's weird.
She's so
kind
weird.
Of amazing.
Yeah. But I think, she's just brilliant. I think no one can write like her. Like, she just freaks you out. It's like, why was that in your brain? Like, you know, when you wake up and you think, oh, that was a really weird dream, like, no one's as weird as me. But then you meet Miranda July and you think, no, wait.
What's the book called, Isabelle?
This one is short stories. It's called No One Belongs Here More Than You.
Fantastic title. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, I went to see her film last year. Did you see that?
Oh, she has a film. Oh, yes, she is a film director as well, isn't she? But I've not seen any of her.
Most peculiar.
I'm going to have to watch it if I can find it.
Metal Bowl. Yeah, yes. In fact, I think I went to it with Sarah Kerwin. But anyway, it was the most peculiar film, and she's I can't even. Anyway, it was really, really good. I love her. I'm a big fan.
It was peculiar, but it was great.
Yeah,
it was fun. I am here. I can hear now.
Yeah.
Where can we find it? Is it like one of these arty ones that you can't really find to rent?
Can you remember what it was called, Sarah?
Do you know? I really can't. But it'll be Googleable, I'm sure, and then there will be links to somewhere where you can see it. What happens to films that when they stop doing the rounds? What does happen to them? I don't know.
Go into the great film pot.
Mm.
Yes. Well, that's interesting. I'll have to have a look out for it.
David's got it. Yes, Cajillionaire.
Oh, okay.
Did you enjoy it? Did you like it, David?
Who's
I haven't seen it. I'm afraid I just Googled it to find out what it was. But I did hear about it when it came out. I haven't seen it though, but I did hear it was very good.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I feel rather cool that I've seen it. Hey.
Yeah, you're ahead of the times now, Claire. We're all going to go watch it.
Yeah. Great. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or not, but I would like to thank. I'd really like to thank. I'd like to thank Isabelle for publishing the book. Yes. And I'd like to thank all of the writers of the short season for coming along and reading the extracts of their beautiful stories. And I'd also really, really like to thank you all for coming. And I'm going to raise, this was actually a really bubbly glass of Prosecco, but now it's rather a flat glass of Prosecco. But I'm going to raise it to you and say Happy Christmas and thank you all so much. Cheers.